MFs, welcome back. Hustle Like You Broke. This might be episode number 30. Amazing how the time flies. We have started this in the time of COVID, Groundhog Day, every day, except when you are listening to us here on the podcast. It's been a great ride. I hope we keep going. I hope this continues well past COVID. I hope COVID is over before much longer. But yet here we are. Today is July 16. It is our second recording of the day. We just wrapped a great one, which presumably drops 2 days before this. I believe that one will come out on July 28th, will have come out on July 28th, because by the time our listeners are listening to me here today, it should be July 30. And that first one was Beth Crudis and Larry Cancro from the Boston Red Sox and Fenway Concerts and Entertainment. We hope that Beth has made it back from her laps around Mars and out into the stratosphere. We hope that our audio problems will not be an affliction to today's episode. But continuing the trend of diverse programming, because that is what we do here at Hustle Like You Broke, we have another new field to introduce on the program today, the world of pyrotechnics. That's right, coming off the 4th of July, where I have never seen so much fireworks before in my life. The timing could not be better. And one of our three guests joining us today, another first. He also has substantial experience in a field we have not touched yet, the world of wrestling. No doubt we will get into that before long. But before we get to that, let's briefly remind our viewers. First and foremost, this is an election year. I hope by now everyone is fully aware. We hope you will vote. We also hope, as we've said so many times before, when you are out in public, please wear a fucking mask. Just wear a mask. In the absence of a cure, and until that happens, if that happens, that's all I ask. Be courteous, be respectful, be all those things, but above all, wear a mask. I hope my co-hosts agree with that. Am I right, Dallas?
Absolutely. I cannot stress it enough. The mask is key.
Brother Banks?
I've got my mask on right now. I'm fully committed.
I don't know what the fuck that was, but okay. Mr. Motherfucker? Kyle Hamilton?
Yes, I'm about inhaling my own air.
There it is. Now, this being the second recording of the day, in instances where we've done that before, I tend to spend less time in monologue, going off on Dear Leader and the fucked up state of the world. But I just want to ask one question today. Why in the fuck would the White House prefer the CDC remove all hospital data from their website and instead send it directly to the White House for them to disseminate rather than sharing it directly with the public? Anybody got a good reason other than the obvious implication that political motivations are more important to this administration than actually telling the truth and hopefully saving lives? Kyle, I know you hate when we talk about spikes. Do you have any thoughts, any reason at all why the White House would act this way?
Absolutely not. The White House has looked at this whole situation. I mean, they literally have politicized this whole situation. I mean, it's a health pandemic. It's people getting sick. It's not Republican or Democrat. It's literally about a virus that's, killing people. And and is a stealth virus to others. But at the end of the day, it's nonpartisan. So how you can make this, if you wear a mask, you're weak and you're a Democrat, and if you don't wear a mask, you're strong and a Republican. And now, all those people who went to that little Republican party that they threw a few weeks ago, a lot of people are wore out as a result of it. But they still making it a partisan situation. I think that's asinine.
Well, let me add a little fuel to that fire because I totally agree. On Monday of this week, this stat's going to blow your mind. On Monday of this week, the countries of France, Italy, Spain, Germany, the UK, Canada, Japan, Australia, and South Korea reported a combined total of 3,023 new cases. These are countries, mind you, that are doing a much better job of testing than we are. And they reported 3,023 new cases. The US, on the other hand, in a country where we have not done a good job of testing, where we intentionally underreport and undertest, because as the president said, well, if we test more, we'll have more cases. Well, no shit, you fucking idiot. In the US, 55,300 new cases were reported on Monday. 55,300 in one country, 3,023 in 9 other countries. Does anybody see the disparity there? Is it just me? Those 9 countries, to be clear, have a total population combined of approximately, I did the math, feel free to check it for yourself, 560 million people versus the US population of 328 million people. So really, if you did the math and you broke it down, what we would have if we were running the same rate as them is 1,780 as opposed to 55,300. That, by the way, is a 1 day total. 1 day. And that doesn't even take into consideration the potential spike that on the date we are airing, people will know about in light of what happened on the 4th of July, where people were congregating in mass. They were not wearing masks. Somebody in the background has a friend or somebody talking. If they could tell them to shut the fuck up or mute their mic or whatever, I digress. But perhaps it's clear the White House prefers not to share data. Put differently, I saw this on social media the other day. This is kind of funny. The US is currently experiencing more heat waves than ever before. But I'm not going to cite environmental factors or anything scientists might be saying because really, well, fake news. The problem is thermometers. We have more than anyone else. More than ever before. So really what we need to do is stop using thermometers. Because if we do that, then we'd have very few days over 80 degrees, if any. Wouldn't you agree, Dallas?
Absolutely. It's very true. But
Clearly that is the problem. Well, speaking of heat, I already said our guests to come to us with a background in pyro. And from what I hear, we're especially fortunate to have one of them with us today, because there was a time when he very nearly killed himself and a friend, or more than one, falling through the ice using a concussion. But we'll get back to that story. I've worked with all 3 of these individuals at their former employers, as well as at their new company, Pyrotecnico. All of us have toured with one whose job was that of a shooter, person who literally has his hand on the trigger, fires off the pyro shots, to align with the music, strategically placed, which is not so easy, mind you. He's also the one with an extensive background in the world of wrestling. The next one came up on the administrative, financial, and logistics side of the pyro business. Make no mistake, I am a big fan of hers. The last but not least, the COO, who managed to live through the concussion he exploded while ice fishing once upon a time, has built a reputation as one of the best in the business due to his knowledge of equipment as well as materials, the delicate balance between design and safety, which he has executed with clients as diverse as Metallica and Celine Dion. Please welcome to the program, friends of all of ours, Keith Hellebrand, Danielle Hicks, and Bob Ross. Welcome, everybody.
Hello there. Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you for having us.
Thank you for the introduction, Matt.
I hope I introduced you accurately. I would love to hear a little more about each of your stories. I tried to glance over them since we do have three of you here with us today. As I said, this is a first. We usually have one, few times we've had two. It's great to have all three. Dallas was actually the one who initially suggested that we call you Keith, and it immediately struck me. We need you all. You all bring a great, diverse perspective. You're all amazing people. You're an amazing team, and why not? But if we could just go down the line, I'd love for each of you to tell us just a little more about us than I already did. And if we could go in the order where I started, Keith, please.
Yeah, I just started doing this last week. I read a manual, and I think I'm going to do great.
I think you will too. I mean, the world of wrestling obviously taught you some lessons.
Wrestling is where I really learned my chops. That show is literally put together day of show and actually during the show. So there's a lot of changes, a lot of chaos. So it definitely kept me on my toes and had to make things happen like really quick. 2-minute commercial breaks change everything. That kind of madness. Pretty insane.
And anything else about your career you'd have our listeners know, or should we just call you the wrestling guy for the duration?
No, I mean, I did wrestling for a long time, but I mean, I did a lot of tours with a lot of pop groups and a lot of different genres in the music industry. I did a lot of corporate shows in Orlando. A lot of, lately, we're doing last few years TV shows, award shows. Bob and I are like the award show guys, and Danielle holds the fort, and we're either the Three Amigos or the Three Stooges. I'm not sure which yet.
Well, I will say for our listeners out there that Keith, we've obviously toured together for a few years,
Yes,
and Keith is a great family man. Keith has actually been around for quite a while, though he doesn't quite let on to that, and he's being very modest about his experience. But he's also like one of the biggest kids on tour. It's like he's happy to be out. He loves life. He loves his job.
Yeah.
He's always smiling, and it's just awesome.
I do. I love it. I mean, how can you not? I mean, it's still to this day with 35 years, and I just love it. So it's pretty exciting.
I mean, and you get to play with fire.
Right? I mean, they actually paid me to do that. It's crazy. I love it. No, it's really, it's unbelievable.
Now, Danielle, as I said, you came up kind of on the administrative logistics side of the business. Tell us a little more of your story, if you would, please.
I started in the business out of school. I was just taking a job to make some money and enter Bob Ross, and he ruined all of those plans for me. Ended up sort of moving up through the company, through the industry, and just figuring out transportation of hazmat and all the quoting side for all of our lovely touring clients and award shows, and just sort of made a little niche for myself within the business in that way.
Well, I appreciate the brevity, but I insist that we get back to more of the day-to-day in logistics, planning, sourcing, permitting, etc. But we can, as I say, we can come back to that in a minute and turn the floor over to Bob.
Oh, thank you, Matt. Well, I take full ownership for completely disrupting Danielle's life plans coming between college and teachers college, because teachers college never got there. But I'm proud of that moment. She's been you know, one of the best teammates you could ask for. And my history was I came from a family of law enforcement, and had been involved in high school theater, and didn't really want to be a law enforcement officer, and just wasn't my vibe, and kind of was the second black sheep in my family by taking a different direction and studying. I was supposed to go to police college up in Elmer Academy, which is just outside of Toronto, and told my mom, really don't want to do this. She said, well, if you're not going to go to police college, you're going to go to some college. And I started applying to technical theater and film production programs, and went and did my degree in theater production. And I was really fortunate that in Toronto there wasn't a huge growing up in Toronto there wasn't a huge touring market compared to what was on the U.S. On the other side of the border, and fortunately fell into an opportunity pre-millennium with Pyrotech Special Effects, which was based out of Toronto. And as they were, everyone was ramping up for that Y2K year, and I think I spent my first 16 months building confetti cannons, just because of the push for New Year's Eve to 1999 to 2000. And just kind of, I was very fortunate to have great mentors and continue a journey, continually build, always hungry for more, and continually wanting to take on and learn more about the industry. And it's been a 21-year journey so far. And I look back at all the great moments I've had to share, whether it's with yourself, Keith and Danielle, and so many other great industry professionals I've had the chance to work with. So never really looked that way. Never really started with special effects. I always wanted to be a scenic designer. Is when I first went into a theater program, and just kind of stumbled across special effects, and there was a need for somebody to come in and work, and I took that opportunity. And some of my college classmates were already working there, and they got me the opportunity to come in and apprentice with that company. So 21 years later, here we sit.
Well, let's stick with that theme of scenic design then, just for a minute, since you mentioned that. So you came up wanting to do that, wound up in pyro. I would argue there's substantial overlap between the two. Certainly, pyro done right becomes not just a part of the scenic design, but can actually fit pretty seamlessly into the design. Am I right?
Absolutely. I mean, there's ourselves and all of our great competitors out there. There's some basic fundamentals of safety and distances to work with, and if you understand the environment or the stage that you're working with, there's a lot of great effects that you can implement into that. And as technologies increased, as well as the quality of the stages and the scenic props we work with, we've really had the ability to integrate effects that are not visible to the audience until they actually are executed. So it allows for that surprise moment and that shock and awe, so to say, for the audience and the fans.
Now, Keith, shifting over to you, since you're the shooter, then, why don't you tell us about some of those specific examples, or why don't you give us a few specific examples of what Bob's saying of effects that fit seamlessly into a design?
Oh, there's many, like if you have a waterfall effect coming out of the truss, with blending in with any kind of background scenic element, the way lighting plays along with it. Many effects fit right in like that. Even like stuff on the stages and set pieces. We've done a lot of gags like that. We had Christina Aguilera on a motorcycle, fake motorcycle, doing popping wheelies, and we had smoke and sparks shooting out the back, which really made it look really cool. So there's a lot of integration like that where you can really showcase each set with that kind of stuff. It's really good.
Very cool. So, Bob, another thing you touched on then was safety. And I have to admit, growing up in New England, I've talked on a couple of our podcasts about the station fire and the impact that had on so many in the Northeast in particular, but nationwide, industry wide. I'll be honest, for years, I really feared pyro in shows. But safety, it really has come a long way. It is something that you guys take very, very seriously. It's not to say that there's never been any sort of issue, any sort of problem. I do remember a small fire happening in a truss once upon a time. I think it was a waterfall effect that caused it. Keith, am I right?
Yes, that was a waterfall effect.
I won't reference which tour that was because that's not necessary. But safety, again, is executed over and over again. And it's not like, home fireworks where people blow up their hands because they're fucking idiots. Like, you guys really understand the safety. Talk to us about that as a major factor in pyrotechnics.
I think, my experience in working in the industry, I've had some great designers I've had the opportunity to work with, and there's pushing close to the line, and then there's crossing the line. And I was fortunate; I had a great mentor that had always kind of instilled the mindset into me. The decision you make today, when you make that decision, just think of one thing in your mind, which is, how am I going to testify about this tomorrow? And I would probably say I am far from the most cavalier pyrotechnician out there. In fact, I probably am more frequent to use the word no. And I don't believe this is the right direction for an effect to some designers, which I know can, no artist and producer likes or enjoys hearing the word no, or if they have an idea, hearing, a negative response to it. But at the end of the day, I've always looked at it as, my job is to, the job that I play for whichever company I'm working for at that time was to ensure that, I protected the other 80 employees at the company that weren't in the field, and that, making sure their livelihood was protected by the decisions I made out in the field. And, pyrotechnics have come a long way, especially more as we've seen the growing market of flame effects and different types of liquid flame effects that have come into the market. And, there's certainly a layer of respect that you have to take into account. And it's, especially when you get into different venues, where every day a venue circulation plays a factor in how our effects work. Whether maybe you have a flame bar that surrounds a drum, the drummer's riser. A bad upstage wind can make an unfortunate situation for that artist, and could result in a injury, not to mention damage to their equipment. And you have, so there's so many environmental factors that you're monitoring through the day. No different than, when we do. Keith and I've had a number of award shows we've been part of that. In rehearsals, the climate acts one way, but knowing, fortunately, we've had the experience that knowing that during the show, if you're pushing 16 different sets in and out of that performance space for an award show, that back loading dock door is open now, and your front doors are now open in the building, where in rehearsals they weren't, because you have attendants coming in and you have a completely different airflow that you're working with. And that's certainly one primary factor to, aside from just the physical distancing we talk about of safe distances from a special effect to an artist, to an audience member, or a soft good being a set or a video wall or other surrounding areas. But it's something that you constantly have to keep in mind while you're working through the day. It's definitely, Keith and I've had, I can't think of a period in my life that, I think it's fair to say, if you play with pyrotechnics, it's not if you have a fire, it's when you have a fire. And it's making sure you take every precaution to be able to anticipate that, as well as manage it when the event happens.
Well, I will say first and foremost that I appreciate that you say no more often than you say yes. That is, we trust you to be mindful of that and considerate of things that those of us might not be seeing or hearing or thinking about, like, the doors being open versus closed and the difference that has. I read, I don't know if it's in a bio or if it was an interview that I was reading up on before this, that you talk about the importance of respecting your equipment and materials. I think that's what you're referring to. Is that something you can talk a little bit more about?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, great learning lessons in life. A good friend of mine that I'm still friends with, him and I had a high school argument that, led to a little physical violence. And back then, you weren't being expelled or suspended or arrested for that matter. And we swung at each other, and I missed, and I hit the fiberglass window in the door in the high school gymnasium, and the principal made me pay to replace the glass and also learn how to replace the glass with the janitor. And he taught me the day you stop respecting glass is the day you'll get cut. And I look back at I've taken that forward with pyrotechnics. Is the day you stop respecting the materials you're working with is the day you'll get hurt. And I have a very specific moment that it's got to be about 15 years ago, where I went to do a show, and it was a reduced budget show for a client that used to be huge. And we went from more pyrotechnics in a single corporate event than Kiss and Metallica together in a single night. And we went to 3 gerbs. And I was twisting wires of a gerb together. And normally, good protocol and safety is when you come in, if your experience with different pyrotechnic touring companies is if they receive a pyro room, so they have a lockable area to keep their product. Generally, if you end up in a room that's carpeted, you'll throw some plywood down to create a non-static environment for yourself to walk on. I'm like, I have 3 gerbs. I'm not going to get plywood today. And sure enough, I was twisting 3 wires together, and I saw the arc between the 2 wire leads, and I happened to be holding the gerb in my hand and got burned. And it was the day I cut a corner, and it bit me. And it's you just can't underappreciate the value of following a process.
So, Keith, why don't you expand upon that same line of thinking then? I mean, talk to us about the day in the life of a pyro shooter on tour, and tell us a little more about some of those safety precautions that you're taking and the manner in which you are, as we said with Bob, respecting your equipment and materials.
Yeah, the biggest thing on tour we always have to deal with is people smoking. Even in non-smoking venues, people still smoke. Outside, people smoke all around. So that's really the big thing. It always has been a big thing, is trying to keep everything away from the smoking people and the cigarettes. But that's why we have the lockable room. We're supposed to have a pyro room where we can do everything safely in this room. It can be locked so nobody has access to it. That's really a big part of it, keeping everything away from everybody. And you do have times where you come out and have to load pyro in a truss, and there's pyro loaded, and there's stagehands working all over the place. And it's just constantly just going ahead, telling everybody, reminding everybody what's going on around them. I've had people come up and want to grab something, and look at it. They stick their face inside something. And it's like, you don't really know what you're doing. So I always remind them, and I tell you every time it's probably the last time they've done that. So it's just keeping everybody aware around you as it's going. It's an all day event. You have to constantly, keep an eye on that. So.
You just reminded me, and I'd never actually thought of this before. I'm pretty sure I have been inside every single room or room type: dressing room, artist room, crew room, production office, tour management office, promoter office, etc. I've never in my life been inside a pyro room. What the fuck goes on in there?
That's where the magic.
I don't know
That's
if
where
you
the
want to
magic
open that
happens.
box.
Oh no, I'm opening.
Exactly.
Come on, let's.
I wonder
What
this
goes
myself.
on?
That's where the
What's that,
magic
Dallas?
happens.
It's one of my biggest nightmares on tour because it's always the funny. It depends on the guys usually who are the pyro team, but it's always interesting what happens with that room over the course of the day.
That's where they only load the concussions.
That's actually, you know what? Honestly, the concussions get loaded usually out on site, right on by the stage
Yo,
before they fly them out.
why do we have concussion? That is the worst
Well,
situation ever in a show. And then you have to grab your ears. You
But
have
it's
to
an
not worry
awesome.
about blowing up the PA. It's
It's
crazy.
an awesome effect when done
To
correct.
who?
See, and I would
For
say, why don't
everyone.
the
I
only
would say,
people who
why
don't
don't
like
you?
it are the sound guys.
Yeah, and I'd say, why don't you have two concussions? Because we gave up playing concerts in mono years ago,
Yeah, one on each side,
one on each side.
times
And
40.
Yo, concussions are the worst. I hate, man, and they never. And then when you do a test, when you're doing rehearsals, you never say when the concussion is going to go off. Oh, it's going to go off sooner or later, and then it just a random explosion.
And then
oh
you'll
yeah,
never forget from then on where it goes off.
But that's
yeah.
not fair. You wear our ears out.
Well, it's one of those things that's been around forever. Honestly, I'm surprised it's still around as long as that it's even still
I know
around.
you get a kick out of lighting them off, Keith, because you look at me after you've done it like, you weren't ready, were you?
Well, it's when you got something like that in your arsenal, why not?
Yeah. I remember years ago we used to have a shooter who I won't disclose the name out on the Kid Rock tour, and the cue used to be "My name is Kid," and as he comes down just before he hits rock, he'd drop we hit a concussion. This guy's timing was just so off, and it was always "My name is Boom." It ended up becoming his nickname because he'd hit it on the wrong moment. Four out of five nights a week, and production wanted him replaced, and it just I think that was in 2001. We were a growing company and had no one to replace him.
Yeah, the concussion is just as important as the 2 and 4 and the drummer. You got to have it. The concussion has to hit right.
Dead on, absolutely.
Oh, I remember.
Talk to us about that a little more too, Keith. I know I kind of busted your balls once upon a time because of a sequence of hits, and it was boom, 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 and it was in succession. And as I understood it, you not only needed to be on the beat, but you had to be triggering ahead of the beat in order for it to go off on the beat, which complicates the matter substantially.
Well, no, they're pretty much like when you hit the button, it goes. So there's no really delay with that. But yeah, I mean, it's timing with the music. You got to stay on with it.
You guys use time code now to launch those, don't you?
Well, a lot of people, time code's a big deal these days. For us older pyro guys, we're kind of like we want to take on time code because we still think we can shoot that good. But it makes sense. I mean, everything is dead on every night.
Yeah, so you guys are caught up with like the lighting guys, time code for everything. The only people who are true to the faders are front of house and monitors.
Well, you know
We
what?
don't use time code.
Yeah, have you seen me use time code ever? I don't use time code myself. I am time code.
Ah, there it is.
It is time code. There it is. Well, that actually raises an
You've
interesting
seen it.
question.
Yeah.
I don't remember who, but one of you referenced technology. And we do talk about that this business has become increasingly a technology business. I mean, part two of my question is, how does the technology side factor into pyro? I mean, again, time code being part of it. But on the flip side of that, I guess part of me wants to ask, if you allow time code to run your technology and to run your pyro, does that actually in some way become a minor safety issue because you're no longer shooting, you're allowing a machine to shoot for you, and we're dealing with fire here? And, I'm just wondering if that it actually creates a risk.
Well, there's somebody holding a dead man switch, what they call it. So if anything weird happens, it can be shut off, immediately. It's the same as if you were shooting it.
But I do think, Matt, it does allow for people to fall into complacency, because
Yes.
you're not as focused into
Yeah.
every beat of that song.
I agree.
And I'm going to say 7 out of 10 performances nowadays have some form of choreography tied to that, and other performers on stage aside from just your lead artists. You're really watching them, and when you're in tune with that song and following beat by beat, watching where you're coming up to, and you're familiar with the blocking because you've gone through it in rehearsals, and you're really, it certainly allows for complacency, in my opinion. We started doing time code with certain shows, but I still prefer to have flame type effects manually triggered first time code as opposed to the pyrotechnics, because the damage a flame can do to somebody, especially nowadays that we're into so many different liquids out there that essentially, have that clinging factor like a napalm to you. If you were to be hit or fall into the stream of it while it's firing off, it's just such a higher risk, and that complacency isn't something that we're ready to switch into. I rather have good, strong, disciplined, musically talented people to execute those cues.
That was certainly what I was referring to. Tell us a little more, though, about technology and how that factors into pyrotechnics.
Well, what I've seen, control system wise, the special effects guy kind of looks like the one man band. Audio, lighting, automation now. There's some sophisticated control systems out there that technicians are using, and as the pyrotechnician, you have your DMX console running a certain group of effects. You have your pyrotechnic controller that follow different standards and approval processes to be allowed in certain states and different countries. And the technology of the control systems really hasn't evolved that greatly. What's really changed on a technology standpoint is different chemical mixtures they're working with on the actual pyrotechnics, primarily looking to reduce smoke. Eliminate some of the black powder, eliminate a higher percentage of black powder, and replace it with a product called nitrocellulose, which is a cleaner burning propellant. And it also allows, because you're reducing that smoke, you get more vibrant colors. And certainly, some companies have referred to it as, they offer high def pyrotechnics, or HD, because it films better. It has less smoke residue and doesn't create that cloud across the stage. We've seen technologies like that evolve in our industry more from a chemistry standpoint in the actual manufacturing of the products. And then, our technology continues to change in the flame effects, where it started with, a flame type effect. It led to flame bars. It changes to, automated jets now that are moving at a x-axis from left to right. Then the technology, someone said, I want to shoot one of these upside down. We started working on technology of how to hold the fluids and be able to utilize an effect inverted without actually, the basic physics is fire burns up. And so when developing these technologies, working on inverted flame effects is ensuring that you don't actually, it's not a one-shot wonder for your piece of equipment you just invested in, that you don't burn the thing up trying to use it on a show, let alone cause an incident in an event. So, it's really, the technologies really come down to either the chemicals in the pyrotechnics or the fluids being used to be able to achieve those effects. And that's really some of the bigger areas we've seen in, cryogenics. Companies have continually been trying to make a better CO2 jet, for the fact that, if I come down to the East Coast with you for a show, we're going to have, big white plumes of CO2 gas. We take that exact same show to Las Vegas or Arizona, and the artist is, what happened to my effect? Just the loss of humidity. So you see a lot of companies working on trying to adapt to those low humidity environments and be able to still keep a consistency in effect for the artist and the client.
So I appreciate you walking us through a bit of the chronology and evolution of pyro. And I understand what you're saying about being able to replicate effects across different atmospheres, but where is pyro going if we could take that next step? Where, technology wise or otherwise, what is next in pyro?
It's a great question. I mean, a lot of, probably the biggest change aside from pyrotechnics, but in the special effects realm, has really been around lasers over the last 10 years. If you remember the mid 90s, early 2000s of touring lasers, you had these large power supplies, water coolers. The pyro guy or laser operator had to find the Zamboni room at every arena to find a tap because everything was water cooled. And when the technology of diodes came along, they were able to recreate those similar light waves through now low voltage, 110 volt, kind of a plug and play laser. No longer required. It was all air cooled, no longer required water cooling, which is probably the biggest change in special effects technology wise, I'd say, in the last 10 to 15 years. And you continue to see new and really impressive laser technology. It started as the 5 watt. I think we're now up. I think there's a 55 watt laser out there now. People just continue to try to increase the power of it. As far, if I was to guess, where do pyrotechnics go as the actual, what we're more traditional to see, the color, the sparks, the flashes. If I was to guess, I'd see that going more along, following more of a green pattern from an environmentally friendly product. There's some companies we're working with right now. If you look at, if you take some of your past shows that you've done with Keith, those pyrotechnics are loaded. They're a one-shot use. All those, they're recycled cardboard tubes, but they go back to be recycled again. Where we're looking at more permanent tubes and reloadable charges, if that makes sense.
I love that, actually. That makes tremendous sense. And I'm glad that you didn't say more sparkulars and crap like that, because I'll be honest, I'm not a huge fan.
They have,
No, thank you.
When those things came out, and people were pushing, there's no permit required, which now requires a permit. But
it was a lie.
To us, it was never a concern. It was just a different layer of media we were adding to shows that we were already doing pyrotechnics in. It was it was something you get a little closer to the audience and a little more artist interaction with, but I don't see it as replacing the industry.
Well, I certainly hope not. And you mentioned the permitting, and I appreciate that because I wanted to loop Danielle back into this conversation next. And Danielle, tell us a little more about the pre-planning that goes into pyro, because there really is more so than with audio, with lighting, with video, save for troubleshooting. You put the equipment out, it goes out for a period of time. Yeah, you've got techs who are making upgrades and troubleshooting along the way and what have you. But pyro's different. Pyro requires more active daily engagement in moving it from place to place. Am I right? Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, from start to finish, it's, Bob always says, well, no, that tour is done. I mean, it's sold, they're out on the road. I was like, that's not true, Bob. I mean, every day needs a permit, and in some places you need even permits for CO2. I mean, that's not everywhere, but flame, we're working with explosive materials. Even though it's low level, it still counts, and fire departments are very much on top of that. So, every show needs a permit. Some are easier to get than others. Other people want you to give blood samples. Not actually, but... and then, day to day, you probably see fire marshals on site or inspectors that are probably picking through your entire stage to decide if they're going to let Keith do what he does every day. And then another layer to that is, the shipping of hazmat. There are some areas that if you want to actually ship pyrotechnics into a city, you need an escort. So we're trying to avoid that. So you drop ship to certain locations. You have to make sure there's nothing left on the truck. It's it's definitely a lot of logistics, a lot of just staying on top of where the tour is going, when the tour is going there, and trying to follow all the rules and make sure we're not upsetting anybody, and giving people like Keith the ability to do what they do every day with as little trouble as possible.
I think one interesting side that Danielle really sees day to day more than myself or Keith is the lead time requirements for permitting in North America. When you have some cities require 30 days, some you can pull it off 2 days before. But really, when you get in, certainly as we've seen our industry turn into an international market, we have, Danielle certainly can speak best on South America and pyrotechnics. I know that's her favorite. So.
I don't want to talk about South America. You need 4 months if you want to get anything into those countries. So it's always a hard battle, trying to either make design decisions or, sometimes tourists don't know for sure where they're going, when they're going, and it's definitely a hard balancing act when we get into places like South America from a dangerous goods perspective.
Well, another element that you didn't even mention that I would imagine is among the biggest challenges, and South America has got to be, as challenging a place as anywhere, is the need for sourcing where you can't actually ship, or you don't have the time, or you won't be granted the permit because it can't come from where it was, and it needs to be used, needs to derive somewhere within the country, and the specifications are different. And I mean, tell us a little about that.
Definitely been in situations where either you're just not able to import, the country just doesn't allow it. It happens a lot in the Middle East. If you ever happen to have a show there, a lot of cities in China also just don't allow it at all. But ultimately it's trying to find somebody local that either has connections with our manufacturers that have, once a year they bring a bunch of stuff in, and they have something that matches up with what we're looking for. Or we've also dealt with having someone say, yeah, my product looks like that, and then they get on site, and I've had more than one technician call me and say, I can't use this. Like, I'm sorry, I tried. So.
Yeah, I remember more than one middle of the night call to a pyro provider saying, remember how you promised us this? That's not what the fuck we just got.
Yep, I've gotten those calls for sure.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to introduce a concept that I haven't told anybody on this podcast before. And I think that pyrotechnics factors into what I'm saying. So Danielle, I want your opinion on this.
Okay.
I think as this industry comes out of the pandemic, there is going to be a growing need for more local resources and sourcing of more local products in more parts of the world than before, where shipping is going to be more challenging, where if we're still dealing with restrictions from pandemic or otherwise, timelines don't work. Again, to what you just said about logistics and pre-planning, Bob, you mentioned this. And I think there will be a growing need for a individual companies that can help with the sourcing, not just in pyro, but in audio, in lighting, in video, in other areas of production. So the question is this a model, what you do now, what you deal with in pyro every day, is this a model which can be applied to other areas of the business?
I think it probably really depends on the technology available in the given areas, because I know a lot of the issues we run into are more bureaucratic, like they won't issue an import permit. So a lot of these companies could buy the pyrotechnics that are made in the US, or the video equipment that's made in the US or in Europe, but their governments won't let them bring it in. So I think that's where, even now, or even before in the model we were working with, that's where we get stuck a lot. It's the government preventing something that is safer to come into the company. So a lot of into the country. So these companies are creating something that is close enough, but it doesn't meet our standards for safety or for, usability. And a lot of times tubes blow up, and I'm sure that's probably true of all of the electronic equipment as well. I can only imagine.
I would imagine you're right. I know that you're right, but I would also say that again, sourcing in especially a place like South America or Asia is a problem unto itself, and the financials of shipping as opposed to sourcing alternatives becomes more challenging. So the notion of with planning to send that gear from Australia to Southeast Asia as opposed to your home base in London or LA or what have you. I just feel like there needs to be a model, especially from a sustainability perspective, where it's not just the finances, but the environmental considerations that make a model like that more of a viable solution for future.
Definitely. I know from an equipment standpoint in special effects, we've started a model working, essentially creating, allies and alliances where, we essentially have created a mutual dry hire opportunity between some trusted vendors overseas and utilizing our own equipment footprint that, if they have artists coming over, we can support that equipment because these are companies that we're utilizing the same equipment footprints or same types of equipment or product types. So if they come over to North America, we have equipment to rent them, they take out. So where production's only bringing their crew over and we support the back end side. Vice versa, when we go over to Europe or the Middle East, working with these same alliances, the biggest thing that I say that hinders us at times is forecasting. I'd say the average pyro vendor on an average tour is probably brought in at best 5 weeks before the tour, knowing that tour has been planned at least a few months in advance. Whether you know the exact design or not, it at least allows the vendor to be able to work with their partners and be able to properly plan to be able to hold those resources, allowing the ability to minimize cost for productions. I look at a classic example of a stage we worked on where the artist wanted a flame bar while we were in rehearsals, and it would have been a very low cost effect to put in, but at the time the stage had already been designed and built and all the joists were running up to downstage and there was no room to lay a flame bar in. Had the effects vendor been involved in some of the earlier planning, would have been able to say, this could be an interesting idea, or you have this effect you like. We need to think of the stage going from a left to, joists going left to right to allow to be able to implement those effects. And, I've always referred as the pyro guys kind of the redheaded stepchild, where last into the budget and first one to be out of the budget. And that usually goes hand in hand with the lead time that effects vendors are given.
You're not the last in the budget. Audio is.
Come on, you're not going to have a show without speakers, but you can have a show without flames.
No, we can have a show without speakers because they do it all with lights and video now. We're second.
Kyle, I was going to call on you to see if you were going to take exception to that.
Video and automation takes precedent over everything now. Lights, then pyro, then audio. We're dead last.
That's true.
Wait a second.
It's true.
I'm going to say audio goes into the budget before pyro, but pyro might come out, but audio might also come out of the budget before pyro. I think both of those things are true.
It really depends on your artist.
We would get stripped of some speakers before you got to get rid of some dragons.
This is true.
Well, it's not fair if you have 24 speakers and only 8 flames. That's not fair. Come on. I'd trade a couple speakers for flames any day.
Look, you can feel your flames outside of the venue. Our speakers,
Thank you very much.
We get clipped real quick. Oh, we need more fire over here. Well, we could take 4 speakers away. and then all of a sudden now you can't hear anything. Well, how come it looks so good? Well,
Well,
something going to sacrifice.
it looked good.
The sound gets sacrificed for the looks.
That's interesting because I've always, one of the things that's always drawn me to special effects is it's one of those few elements that you can bring to a gathering of people that caters to so many senses, like so many of your human senses. It's visual, it's audio. Everyone knows the smell of pyrotechnics and fireworks. I mean, you can be walking down the street and smell them at night, and you're like, oh, someone's setting off fireworks. It triggers. To me, it's always been something that has so much human connection in the way it relates in an event or a show. And
I mean, they also get their own room, so audio does not get its own room.
Yeah. Well, you go back to that. The key of that room is 9 times out of 10. It's usually a referee locker room, but it's usually a room that has a shower in it, and that's probably one of the biggest perks as being a pyro guy on the road is having your own shower.
Well, that was the closest I got to an answer to what actually happens in that pyro room too. Because it's not lost on me that I asked the question and nobody answered it.
A lot less happens in those pyro rooms. A lot less happens in those rooms in the last decade than maybe a couple decades ago.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Fight Club, That'll be in the book or in the movie or whichever.
Danielle, I've got a question for you. Is it rare to see women in the business? Are you one of the rarities and therefore have a great reputation for being that? Or is it not something that's a big deal in the industry?
I say when I started, I don't think we had any female technicians at all. I was one of 2 women that worked at Pyrotech Special Effects. But coming over to Pyrotecnico, we have probably more female special effects technicians than we do male at this point. I mean, that might be an exaggeration, but it's a much different.
I think it's pretty close.
Yeah, it's pretty close, and almost our whole production team for the effects side is female. I think Keith is one of the few men that is on all of our calls. So it's definitely shifting recently. I don't know if that's a company difference or if it's really a change in the industry that we're in. But it's nice to see from my perspective. So when I started, that was not the case.
Yeah, I can imagine that being a gratuitous part of it. Yeah, that would be interesting because I know on tour I don't recall ever having seen any women pyro teams out there. So that's nice to hear. It is changing.
It definitely is. I mean, they were few and far between, but I mean, as Danielle said, Keith is one of 2 males in the production team. And we're fortunate that the owner of the company, his daughter, who's the 5th generation in the family in the company now, is one of our lead operators and manages a lot of our larger tours for the company. And I look at her; she's at the age of 23, and I look at the level of responsibility she carries with our clients and representing the company. And I look back to where I was at 23, and I did not carry that much professional maturity at that point in my life. That's for sure.
Well, Dallas, I appreciate you asking that question, and I appreciate the answer as well. We always talking about the need for more women in the business. It's great to hear. I honestly wouldn't have thought that you'd have a female-dominated office, and I'm glad to hear that. Kudos to Pyrotecnico for that. Danielle, you also referenced Pyrotech, your former company, and I didn't use it by name when I introduced you guys, but have a relationship with those guys. And I'd be remiss not to say that there is at least one woman over there, still there to my knowledge, who I'm very fond of, and she's great. And certainly she has been at any number of shows that I've been on the road with, and always appreciate that. So I just wanted to call out to her if she's listening. I do appreciate her as well. And again, more women in the business, the better.
Absolutely. And when my time ended with that company, in the office we had plenty of women working there and just kicking butt every day. And the number of women on the road had definitely increased in the 11 years that I was there. So it's always always nice to see.
Now, I do have to ask though, as just one qualifier, again, given my limited experience, you can tell me shut the fuck up. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm always open to that, but I don't know of any female shooters. Would there? You say? Do you have female shooters in house?
Oh yeah, we have
Yeah.
several.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I'd say if not 10, over 10 female shooters
Wow.
in the company.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, next time I call you guys, I don't want Keith. Give me
Man,
Just
I don't
kidding.
blame you.
kidding.
There goes the job security, Keith.
Jeez.
Ah, there it goes.
Uh,
What's he doing on this podcast? Fuck.
what the heck is that guy doing here?
Just kidding. Really, just kidding. But actually, Keith, let me bring you back in. I mean, is there anything else about being a shooter that you feel like our listeners should know? I love that Bob said that, he made an allusion to the fact that shooters should have musical backgrounds.
Well,
I forget what you told me you do, but I can't remember.
it helps if you can count to 4. But no,
sometimes 3.
Yeah, it that certainly helps if you have a little bit of rhythm in you. But yeah, I mean that's a big part of it. It's sometimes it's really intense where you're actually part of it's a different instrument. You're part of the band. You're hitting stuff just like anybody else on stage, and you have to be right there with them. So
there it is.
That's the fun part. I really like doing that. I enjoy that.
And again, going back to your wrestling experience, I mean, is there anything else that has kind of cross applications that gives you an edge, or that you think people should understand about pyro?
I learned a lot about doing pyro for television on that, because it's a whole different world doing it for television as opposed to doing it for like a live concert, because you're shooting for the camera, not for the audience. So on the wrestling shows, the audience was just props, really. They were just props there. It was all for the camera. So that taught me a lot too.
Well, speaking of shooting for the camera and not for the audience, then, I mean, given the times right now, and aside from the fact that this year's 4th of July was just ridiculous, and it's not because cities and states were authorizing, and again, I can only speak to the US. I'm not so sure. I know you guys have an outlet in Canada and overseas, and whether there was a lot of activity with large scale fireworks that you were a part of. But in light of the virus, and given the amount of virtual presentations, I know I've seen a lot of lasers, which you talked about before, Bob, but are you guys doing much with pyro, and where that wrestling experience would actually give you an edge?
Well, right now, I mean, we did a July 4th show. That's the only thing I have done at this point.
But we did have
not much virtual presentations, live streaming events that have used pyro.
Yeah, we were fortunate that we had a client of ours in Florida that took their traditional 4th of July show on the beach, and they decided that they wanted to make it a stay-at-home event and still celebrate 4th of July for its community. And what they did was 4 undisclosed locations where we did 4 firework sites. And through technology, we do a lot of work in simulations and different visual softwares for our clients. We're able to sit with them and work through the elevations of their community and identify, if we use this size of a firework, X number of people within so many miles would be able to still see the show, and kind of plot our 4 firing sites to be able to bring a 4th of July show to the community. And that was also televised, which was a really great experience to be part of, seeing, a different logistical planning going into what would have traditionally been, arranging for barges and ensuring that the team was safe out on the ocean there through that event. And it went from essentially 1 show to 4 shows, and brought a grander experience to the community. And we ran a case study of the 3 successful models that we felt that we participated in across the United States, and studying the different shows they had to be able to bring an event to your community, yet still keep everyone at a home front type of environment.
There it is. Well, you guys have been great, and I really appreciate your time. At this point, we usually move into our quick hits, where I would ask you each, I suppose, your first tour, briefly. Bob?
My first tour was Kiss.
That's a big one. There you go.
It was great.
Danielle?
Well, I've never actually been on tour. I am the home base at the office, but the first tour I remember working on was My Chemical Romance. I was faxing permit applications when I first started.
Well, you said the word fax.
I did.
Wow.
I used to know how to use a fax machine.
Wow,
Crazy.
classic.
Danielle, you're not that old. I know it. I've seen you. You're not that old. Keith, what about you?
My first legit pyro tour, I guess, was Two Live Crew.
Two
Good
Live
old
Crew.
Luke Campbell.
Luke, brother Luke,
The
and the
band.
boys. Yeah,
Luke's on.
I go
That's
way
it.
back.
Miami
with Luke.
based sound.
Let me see it.
That's the way to go.
Some interesting stories with that man. He was awesome, though.
Can
Good
you tell
stuff.
us
Man,
one?
he's still awesome. He is incredible. What he does in this community and what he fights for. Just had to interject and give him man props because he is Luther Campbell is a bomb.
Still to this day, he's
To this
still
day.
on it. Yeah, he's unbelievable what he does in the community down there. We love that guy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Come on, Keith,
He's
give us a
the king
taste.
of- Never mind.
What?
You got Kyle excited. Go ahead, Kyle. Tell us what you
He's
want to
the
say.
king of, but we won't. He's the king of ass. Let's give it up.
Yeah.
No backstage pass. What?
I felt we did a show where it was basically he is in a hot tub and it gets lowered in on 4 motors, and he's in there with 2 girls in the hot tub, and
Full of ass.
yeah. So apparently one of the motors dies, so it's stuck halfway in the air. Regger had to rappel in, fix the motor. So Luke's up there. Well, just whatever. Might as well while you're up there, and put on his own little show. I mean, that's how he was. I can't really say anymore, I guess, but
Yeah, I'm okay. I won't push for more.
you get the
So,
gist.
separate from Two Live Crew, do you have a best moment that you can share with us, Keith?
Oh, like touring when I toured with Timberlake, he was probably the coolest guy out there. Really good guy, family, like home feeling. My brother had passed away when we were on tour in England, and he kind of made sure I got home right away and took care of everything. And good dude, really good dude. I did a lot of the pop tours for a long time, so they were all good, like family based type scenarios. So yeah, those are all good.
I appreciate that. Danielle?
I don't know if I have a best moment. I have a fond memory of Keith that I can reference.
Please.
Back when he used to tour all the time, he doesn't do much of that now, but he would call on show days only when there was an issue. And then one day, I guess he got wise that he could listen to me panic on the phone if he called on a show day and nothing was wrong. So looking back, that's a fond memory.
I was actually going to mention that because I used to love to call you to hear your voice, answer the phone at like 4 o'clock on a show day. Like, oh shit, what happened?
Why are you calling me? Something must be horribly wrong.
Yeah, all good.
I mean, did you tell her anything crazy that had happened? I mean, what did you tell her?
Well, I would just say, hey, what's going on over there? What's the weather like? Just say hey. And she would immediately think that I was just like calling saying there was some problem because it was right around fire marshal time in the afternoon.
Technicians do not call me on show day unless there's a problem. They call other days to chat.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sounds about right. Bob, what about you?
I've got a lot of good ones, but probably the most recent one that was really exciting was Keith and I recently just did an award show last year. And it was a 18.5-minute tribute song of this art. This artist was winning a Lifetime Achievement Award, and trying to keep track of that song during a phase of 18 minutes. We did the first rehearsal. We got into dress rehearsal, and the artist decided to sit in the audience and not sing the lyric and not sing.
Oh yeah.
And Keith and I, we were so lost. I had 2 stopwatches going. I'm trying to watch blocking. We got cues coming up. And finally I looked at Keith. I'm like, just turn the key off. I'm like, we are lost. And it wasn't wasn't a successful execution, but it was again, played on the side of safety, and it just, Keith and I are both up there ready to go, and then we're like, where's the words?
We had no idea where we were in the song. Only 3 people knew, and it was 3 people in the band.
Yeah, stage manager had no clue. They're looking at me asking to cue them to send in one of the featured guests that were performing. It's like, where are we? Like, I don't know. And it was just, it's one of those you can't make those moments up type of things that occurred in our life. And I've been fortunate that most of those moments I've had in my life have been with Keith, and they've been good times. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
So this is a tough one, a little bit tougher than, if there's one thing about the industry you'd like us to change or do better coming out of the current coronation, what is it? Bob?
I think if I was to look at one thing that our industry needs, is primarily the creating a wellness environment for our technicians on the road. We all know we work long hours. We do it because we love it, and we are gluttons for punishment. And the word failure, I don't feel exists in many of the people I've had the opportunity to work with. But one thing, when a lot of us start young in this industry as well, and the one thing that's never really been there in a support side has been how to financially plan for your future. Your body as a roadie is only going to take you so far. Looking at companies to create succession plans where they bring you on, train you, put you out on the road in your time, but create a future and an opportunity to go into a management or a sales or a technical support standpoint to create more of a longevity than just a contract employee that so many of us have played the role as in different tours. To me, that'd be one thing I'd love to see all of our competitors and all the different vendors work on, is creating a knowledge base. Like I said, from financial planning to kind of throw in dietary and physical health too.
It's a fairly comprehensive answer, actually. Not exactly one thing there. Danielle, that's going to be a tough one to top. What do you got?
I was going to say, I just agree with Bob. So maybe I'll take his physical wellness and health, and he can have the financial planning.
I mean, you look at it, Matt, you went to the gym, you warm up, you stretch. We go in and start lifting boxes and cases and motors and truss, and usually we make a quick stop to get 2 cups in catering, one for coffee and the other one to throw some sticks of bacon or sausage in, and go right back to the dock and start lifting. And I just look at an opportunity to create a healthier environment for us.
Yeah, a lot of times on-site meals can be kind of scarce or real quick. You're not even sitting down to eat. You're running. That's a big thing at some point.
I think those are all great answers. Although mostly Keith and Danielle, you just kind of stole Bob's, but I'll leave it alone.
Yeah, we're good.
He had a good answer.
We're right.
No, he had a great answer. And
answer,
truth
Bob.
be told, we've asked this of everybody, and increasingly that is the most common. And I'm glad to hear it. I think that you're right on the money. All of it, the health, the wellness, the financial planning, all of it.
And mental health also.
Well, yes, absolutely. Mental health definitely is a factor. Well, I got a softball to get you out of here then, because you guys have been great. Reverse order again. Keith, shout outs or parting shots?
Really, to shout out to everybody at Pyrotecnico, the family that has welcomed me there. It's been now officially a year. So everybody there has been great, and I appreciate that. Also to where I used to work, everybody there, loved them all too. And shout out to my family and my peeps, and Chris Lee and Kyle Hamilton, Christine Dallas, everybody. That's about it.
Danielle?
Giving a shout out to everyone at Pyrotecnico. It's like Keith, been very welcome there, and you immediately feel like part of the family, and they're all just awesome people. Everybody at Pyrotech as well. I definitely miss a lot of those people. They were family for a very, very long time, and just saying hi to everybody.
Excellent. And you, Bob?
I got to give a shout out to my competitors because they push me to up my game every day, and you need motivation. And I'm fortunate to have great competitors out there that push me to try to leap those tall skyscrapers and cross those boundaries. And I got to give a shout out to my mom because otherwise I'd be a defunded law enforcement officer right now if I hadn't have listened to her and took the easy way out. So.
Well, we appreciate you guys being on the program. Keith Hellebrand, Danielle Hicks, Bob Ross, Pyrotecnico. You guys have been great. Another one in the can. Like I said, I believe this is number 30. We're having a great time here. We appreciate our listeners. We look forward to doing it again and again. We definitely welcome you guys to come back, to join us again, to tell us more about the changing world of pyrotechnics. To my co-hosts, Dallas, Banks, Kyle, appreciate y'all. To our listeners, it's a pleasure to be here with you every Tuesday, Thursday. We appreciate your support. And on that note, just a quick reminder, I'd be remiss, Sam, our tech support. I got to thank Sam. Sam is fantastic. He's our behind the scenes guy. Always got to give a shout out to him. And of course, he'd be remiss I'm not using that word right. He'd be upset with me if I did not tag HLUB Podcast on Instagram and hustlelikeyouBroke.com. As always, send us your questions. Let us know your thoughts. We appreciate you being with us. Thank you all, and